Wow, that right there actually was a really solid episode of Batwoman Season 3. I actually enjoyed that quite a bit, which I think was pretty cool, especially since you probably noticed that I didn't do a video last week on episode 4, and that's honestly just because I wasn't into it. I was super bored with the episode and just didn't feel like there was any point in making a video on it. But this week's episode was a huge turnaround. This was a great episode, although I do have to admit that really the main things that are interesting me in this are all the connections to Batman villains and all the stuff relating to Ryan and Jada, and basically all the Batwoman stuff is the least interesting parts of this show, which I think most people agree with. And you can see that in this season they're really doubling down on the Batman villains. So hey, I mean, at least they admit it, that that's kind of the big thing that attracts people to the show. But I mean, they're doing a pretty good job with it. I'm liking it so far, especially in this week's episode. So anyways, guys, let's go ahead and jump into breaking down this episode. Of course, quick spoiler warning for Batwoman Season 3, Episode 5, A Lesson from Professor Pig. So we start off this episode with, of course, a new murder in town that is being investigated by both Ryan and Alice. And Renee thinks that it's somebody using Catwoman's whip because of just, how the body was left and all that stuff. But Ryan thinks, no, that's not the case. It can't be Catwoman's whip. It's got to be some other Batman villain. Of course, later in the episode, we find out who it actually is. But the majority of this episode takes place in Jada's home, because we have Ryan and Sophie visiting Jada, and they're doing like a family dinner. Marquis even shows up, and basically Jada wanted to host this dinner just to tell Ryan that she's upset about her basically secret partnership with Marquis. So then Marquis shows up. And I also love how in this that Sophie was actually pretending to be Ryan's girlfriend. And of course we know there's some actual tension there, and hopefully, most likely and probably, they will actually get together in real life, outside of just pretending to be dating. Within the next few episodes, that's definitely going to happen. And I'm honestly really excited to see. I feel like the writing for this season between those two characters and their chemistry has been really good so far. So I'm excited to see where that goes. But the best part of this episode was Professor Pig, because that's the big reveal here, is that the butcher or the chef that's working for Jada is Professor Pig. And obviously you could tell from the title of the episode that, it's Professor Pig, a classic Batman villain. Honestly, one of my favorite Batman villains that I'd love to see used more. We recently saw him in, well, not recently, but we did see him in live action previously in Gotham, which I thought was a great version of the character. So I love seeing the character return here once again. And unlike with Killer Croc, where we got first look photos of the character ahead of time, I don't think we got a first look before the episode came out, or maybe we did, I just didn't see it. So my first time seeing the look of Professor Pig was in this episode, so I actually really enjoyed that, kind of having that surprise, and honestly loved the look of Professor Pig. Like comparing it to the look of Professor Pig in Gotham, he definitely looks way more comics accurate, and that's the thing. I think actually, I like the look of this Professor Pig more than Professor Pig from Gotham, but at the same time, I definitely prefer the personality and just, everything else about Professor Pig from Gotham, because this one was a little weird. I mean, he kept saying weird corny jokes about the three little pigs and stuff like that. It was a little weird, but I did really enjoy having him as the villain of this episode. And Jada actually even mentions that this chef came from Metropolis, so I thought that was another really cool connection that we had featured in this episode. But after dinner, everybody starts getting hazy and just feeling weird, and their body parts just start feeling numb, like their arms and stuff. And all of a sudden, Professor Pig reveals himself. Laszlo Valentine, of course, he used to work for Jada, but she fired him, so now he wants revenge. Classic story. And luckily, our characters are able to escape into the panic room, at least for a little bit, until Marcus has what I think is a panic attack. I don't really know exactly what it is, but at least something along those lines. So while Professor Pig is building a bomb, Jada distracts him while Ryan goes to get Marcus's EpiPen. But of course, unfortunately, things do not go as smoothly as planned, so things go wrong there. But basically, by the end of it, Sophie ends up being the one to give the EpiPen to Marcus. He wakes up, he was full on passed out, but he wakes up, and first thing he does is grab a knife and straight up murder Professor Pig, which I thought was cool, but not cool at the same time, because, not cool because now, Professor Pig was really an awesome villain in this episode. Now he's dead and we're never going to see him again. But at the same time, as we find out the big reveal at the end of this episode when it comes to Marcus's character, it fits. and I actually like where it's going. But we'll talk about that more later in the video because I'm really excited to see where that goes. But first, let's talk about Alice in this episode, because really her whole thing in this episode is that she is still investigating that murder from the beginning. So she checks up in with Renee Montoya and goes through the different files of classic Batman villains. So we get some great name drops here, including Magpie, the Whip, Talia al Ghul, and basically she comes to the conclusion it's none of those, but she does take a little bit of interest in Renee's interest and like her classified files on Poison Ivy and why she's so specifically interested in Poison Ivy specifically. And basically Renee Montoya reveals to her not only the origin of Poison Ivy, but actually that they used to date, which was not something I saw coming, but it makes sense, seeing as a couple episodes ago Renee mentioned like I have experience with Poison Ivy or something like that. So I kind of like that. I like where they're going with that, and I like that we're getting more set up here for Poison Ivy, because of course she is, as far as we're assuming, going to be the main villain of the season. Hopefully we actually see her sometime soon, maybe even next week's episode. I don't know for sure, but we do get some other setup with this at the end of the episode when Alice returns to talk to Renee once again, with, first of all, actually the identity of this killer, and it's actually the Flamingo, which I thought was really awesome, because I remember at the beginning of the episode when she was going through those files of different villains that used whips and like could possibly be behind the murder of that guy, one of the first Batman villains that popped into my head was, oh, the Flamingo, just because, you know, like the pink feather boa and everything. So I thought that was hilarious that actually ended up being the case, and just the fact that they mentioned the Flamingo in this episode, because he's such an obscure Batman villain, but he is in my Batman character encyclopedia, so that's how I know about the character. So I thought that was an awesome reference there. But then she does also reveal that Alice also found some dead Poison Ivy vines. And Renee is super confused by this, because she says the vines can only die if she's infected someone else. So I have a feeling this means that possibly the Poison Ivy we're seeing in this season maybe isn't even the original Poison Ivy Pamela Isley that Renee was dating. Possibly a new version of the character, similar to how in the first couple episodes we got a new iteration of the Mad Hatter, a new iteration of Killer Croc. And we could be getting that same thing here with Poison Ivy, which, I mean, is disappointing, but at the same time, you know, we're getting Poison Ivy, so it's good enough. I mean, I'll take what I can get. And we do see from the promo for next week's episode where Alice does actually mention that it seems like there's like a copycat Poison Ivy, and that it could possibly be Mary, because she was like dragged away by the vines last episode, or the episode before that, and then just like it went nowhere in last week's episode. So that's definitely going to be really interesting, and I'd be excited to see that. But anyways, we do also get, like I said, this big reveal at the end of the episode. First of all, actually, Sophie calls that their first date between her and Ryan, so I thought that was really cool. Again, they're totally getting together. But Jada has another conversation with Ryan where she says Marcus is sick, and she tells stories of this school field trip that he went on years and years ago, where the Joker attacked and took over the bus and took his joy buzzer from his hand, pressed it against Marcus's forehead, and basically just like electrocuted his brain. And now basically Marcus is very, very mentally ill and messed up in the head. And you get to see Ryan going through a bunch of other files of him just like acting really weird and like misbehaving. And then the last one, whoa, this one was absolutely insane, where it's like a video of him and his father, and he like made a sandwich for his father. Turns out there's peanut butter in the sandwich. I think that's what it was. Turns out his father is allergic to peanut butter. So boom, he just murdered his father right there. And he literally, in the video when Marcus is talking, he's like, oh, looks like he's on to me. And he plays it off as like a joke, but like he literally just murdered his father. So I love this dark killer twist to Marcus, because it's not at all something I was expecting when the character was first introduced. When he was first introduced, I thought he was just going to be like, oh, some cool basketball player, and he was like, oh yeah, I'm the cool brother. But no, not at all. Things are taking a dark twist here, and I am loving it. And also actually makes me kind of feel more sympathetic for Jada as well, because then she reveals to Ryan that the true reason she gave up Ryan was just because she was protecting her, because she didn't want Ryan to have to live in an environment with Marcus and risk her life being at risk every day. I thought that was really, really cool, because so far Jada has just been a complete jerk and not a character at all that I like, but this gives us a reason to kind of explain her reasoning. I like that quite a bit. And then our ending shot of the episode is Marcus with still the blood all over his clothes from murdering Professor Pig. And then all of a sudden, he like takes blood and just like paints a bloody frown on his face. And oh, so good. Almost feels like he's going to become a Joker-like character, which I absolutely love, because, you know, obviously due to rights and, you know, Warner Brothers and DC and everything, they can't do regular full-on Joker in this show, but they can do versions of these Batman villains, like a new version of the Joker, which honestly, I'm liking where this is going. I'm so excited for this. Again, this was a great episode. Not at all expecting it. I love seeing Professor Pig, even though he's dead. I love the setup for Poison Ivy. I loved references to classic Batman villains, like even the Flamingo. And of course, this huge setup at the end. But guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think about this week's episode of Batwoman Season 3? What did you think about this new version of Professor Pig? How does he compare to Gotham and other versions of the character? And just where do you want to see things go in the rest of Batwoman Season 3? So anyways, guys, thanks for watching. Please drop a like if you enjoyed this video, and hit the subscribe button so you can keep it up to date on everything goes on in the DC life.